I'm not sure who it was that mentioned just sort of the voter turnout and 26% returns, and that maybe civic engagement is different. But the 26th Amendment gave 18-year-olds the right to vote in elections, and since then we've sort of seen flux back and forth, and most recently an increase. What do you think? I guess how would you address that as far as, do you really think that there's no need to vote? Or would you, I'm sorry, I'm trying to think of the question. If Tocqueville had seen the 26th Amendment pass, would you think that is an example of being a vibrant democracy? And can you explain why then voter turnouts are so low?
Voting is a vital part of any democracy. It's how the people express their wishes for what the government should do. But it is not the only one, and it is not the only important expression of people's spirit. And so, in address to the 26th Amendment, I think de Tocqueville would praise the more involvement that it gave youth voters. And I think he would also especially praise the process in which it was brought about due to the vast mobilization of people such as Vietnam protests and social protests to try to bring about the change. So I think he would both praise the process that brought it about as well as the result.
In reference to the low voter turnout, this was in reference to Birmingham recent polls. That's due to the lack of trust that our local government, our local citizens feel in our government. 4 out of 5 of our recent city officials are not running anymore in the race due to much corruption in our actual Birmingham government. This is a core reason why people feel like their attention towards civic associations, like local activities, are more important than actually voting, because they feel their vote can't make a difference much in the corruption.
And if you compare the U.S. voter turnout to democracies worldwide, we actually have a relatively low one compared to even Iraq, who had 8% greater voter turnout than we did. However, it's because American citizens participate in these local assemblies, and because they have a strong religious foundation, that our democracy is vibrant, because voting is not the only expression of democracy. It's a critical one, but it's not the only one.
Tocqueville wrote that Americans were more conversant with notions of rights and principles of freedom than the greater part of Europeans. How did they get to be, in Tocqueville's time, conversant with notions of rights and concerned with freedom, as compared to today? How do people get to be conversant with their rights? And why is that important?
Well, if you look at Tocqueville's time, I think the reason they're so concerned with protections of rights is because of our colonial history. We had to fight for our freedom from the British because they didn't give us equal representation, and because they weren't addressing our issues. So when the framers were creating the Constitution, they felt like it was critical that we have these democratic constitutions, that we have representative democracy. And also, from that, people were more involved because they had to fight for our freedom, and they sent their own sons and daughters to fight. So they were more aware, and they were more concerned with the protection of our rights.
And even before our revolutionary history, America was, as de Tocqueville mentioned, a classless society. We did not have the stratified classes that Europe did. We did not have an ingrained nobility, and our Constitution specifically bars titles of nobility. So I think that is a definite, since we're all equal, we all have the equal rights and protections, and I think that also funneled in. And now, looking at a more modern sense, I think one of the main drivers of our recognition that rights must be written out and protected is the way civics we are educated about civics. Ever since we are young children, we are taught that the Constitution and the Bill of Rights are the highest documents in our land, and that the founding fathers were amazing men that were almost gods upon earth, that they were such great philosophers and knew what the people needed. And so in that education about and our respect for our founding and for our Bill of Rights and constitutional protections, I think ingrains that spirit in us today.
You are always turned on to political involvement, political participation, but when you go back home, you're going to face a lot of your fellow students who are not as engaged and not as interested. Your generation is our leaders in apathy in terms of involvement. What's the killer argument you're going to make to them of why they should be interested and involved?
Well, I do think that we do have a large group of citizens in our own in Vestavia Hills that do get involved. We have a program, Relay for Life, which supports cancer research, and I think that instead of waiting to vote for a politician to support this program, we take action to raise money for awareness. And I think that people get involved in these kind of associations that aren't necessarily just political, however they involve the entire community.